Outpost Rock in Afghanistan. That's a burial ground to massacres dating back centuries. That rock, it's 100 feet tall, and it was built into a defense position by the Taliban, and it includes a collapsed tunnel system underneath. The remains of thousands of slaughtered date back to the time of Alexander the Great, and those stationed there, they've called OP Rock an eerie, paranormal, and disturbing place. A village nearby, Amir Aga, it's home to a shrine of the Prophet Muhammad's uncle, Amir Hamza. The entire village believes that Hamza guards the sacred area and his people, but only those who do not betray him, or harm, or steal from Amir Aga. Islamic people have deep beliefs in mostly invisible creatures that are said to arise from mist, smoke, or fire, and who cause mischief, misfortune, or even death to those unlucky enough to cross their paths. These creatures, they're called Djinn. They're spirits that are so immersed in revenge that they are essentially walking curses themselves. Before US Marines arrived on OP Rock in 2009, British soldiers were there for 2 months. And before the British, another US Marine unit crossed into Amir Aga and stole precious objects from Amir Hamza's shrine. These hundreds-of-year-old stones, they were said to protect the area. Stealing them, they unleashed a Djinn curse of revenge, of which OP Rock is still the continued setting of. This is the detailed account of one of those US Marines from 2009. He witnessed the terrifying happenings at the outpost, and he inevitably became the victim of a curse that was never his to begin with. Jackson's journal entry will chill you to the bone. When my squad arrived at the base of OP Rock, I got a weird feeling. I'm not one to believe in woo-woo things at all, but something felt off right from the start. The dry desert backdrop had felt a little depressing to me since we'd first arrived in Afghanistan, but I'd grown used to it. This was something else. When we got to the top of that rock to meet and say farewell to the British Marines, my gut turned even more. Something was off about them too. Their eyes were hollow, and they looked simultaneously sickly and jumpy. Their grim expressions were apparent, and a few of them had shaky hands as well. They were spooked. They were definitely ready to flee. Fear goes with the job of being a Marine, so I wasn't too upset by them. Crazy things happen all the time, and we'd been trained for them. Well, almost all of them. I'd hold on to my rational thinking a bit longer and see this as just another day in the life. As the British left, their captain pulled our Sergeant Woodlock aside, and he said loud enough for me to hear, "If you dig anything up here, you put it back." He did not elaborate or explain himself at all. He just quickly turned, and he left us all to wonder what the hell he meant. And suddenly, I heard the sound of barking as the last British Marine came running out of the barracks, followed by a box-wheeler dog. "This is Betty," he said. "She's a great girl, and she'll keep you safe. Trust her." He saluted us, so I saluted back. And then for some reason, Betty ran right over to me. I liked her right away. Our interpreter, Z, was squeezing his brown prayer beads as he walked throughout the post, muttering something about Djinn. "What is that?" I asked him. "Cursed." That's all he said. I still didn't think much of it, even though my stomach was doing tiny flips. Rational, logical, controlled. That's what I'd think to myself. I kept that sentence playing on repeat in my head as I went about the evening, even though every single one of my senses was telling me that something bad was about to happen. After dinner, I retired to my tiny hut to turn in. Just before drifting asleep, though, I heard this whimpering at the door. I opened it up. I saw Betty. She came right in. She made me feel protected, so we slept next to each other throughout that night. She was already starting to remind me of Buddy. That's the dog I had as a boy. Back home, I was in the middle of a divorce, and my ex-wife and I, we never had pets. There's something about having an animal next to you on your first night in an admittedly scary, foreign place. I was very grateful. The next day, it was decided that we would dig deeper into those trenches to make for a more secure and hidden area. As it was, popping one's head out or up too high could be seen from any enemy from the desert and the surrounding areas. But see, the trouble started when Corporal Lena's shovel struck metal while digging. "Sarge, you gotta see this," he called out while brushing dirt off a stake with Cyrillic writing on it. "Soviet?" Sergeant Woodlock asked. Lena nodded. "There's a Slavic word written on it. I don't know what that means, but there's a date. February 21, 1988. Z grabbed that stake from Lena's hand and said, "It means boundary." Z's face dropped as he told us that story about the day an entire Soviet unit disappeared without one trace. He said that a nearby village is where Soviet tanks got stuck in the mud and that they were still there and they couldn't be moved. He believed that this was because of the power of the Amir Hamzad shrine that protected this land from foreign invaders. And just before going quiet again, he muttered under his breath, "Do not disrespect Muhammad's kin." By sunset, we'd unearthed dozens of skeletons throughout this trench, including men in Soviet uniforms alongside older remains in traditional Afghan clothing. Lena looked white as a ghost as we surveyed the bones around us. "We're sleeping on top of mass graves," he whispered. Z looked very stressed, and he said, "The Djinn are not ghosts. They are different. They're made from smokeless fire before humans. Many deaths make them strong." And he pointed at the ground. "They are hungry for more souls." A few nights later, I began having reoccurring nightmares about my childhood. Night Watch had commandeered Betty to do her job and scan for any signs of invaders, so I was alone. But in the dream, I was running through a forest back home in Wyoming, screaming for my dog, Buddy, at the top of my lungs. He was out there. And it was early morning in October. It was prime hunting season, and I saw flashes of camouflage. I heard a gunshot and then the sound of an animal wailing, and I ran in the direction of the cries to find Buddy on the ground bleeding from his neck. A man stood behind him with a bottle of whiskey. As he looked down at my dying dog unapologetically, "You should have kept better watch of your mutt, you idiot," he said before turning and walking away. I woke up in a sweat remembering that traumatic event like a bullet to the brain. I couldn't believe that I'd forgotten those details. They'd been buried deep down, where a boy's pain needs to be erased in order to become a man. Suddenly, I felt a paw slap over my hand. I turned to see Buddy sitting there with a hole in his neck, bleeding over my bed. And I screamed. I jumped back to grab my flashlight. I shined it on the bed. There's nothing there. I was so scared. I had to focus on breathing until the sun came up just to catch my breath. The next day, Private Kerrigan told us that during Night Watch, he picked up transmissions on our encrypted Singar's radio. He said that they were in fragments of Russian, which would have been impossible since it only picked up the surrounding area. He said that they were whispering, but that sometimes they'd scream. I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to add to any potential hysteria already brewing beneath the surface of the other poised soldiers they were trying not to crack. It became obvious to me, at that point, we were being hunted by something evil. And after dinner, while playing fetch with Betty, she totally disregarded the tennis ball that I'd thrown past her, and instead she just stared at me. She wasn't looking at me though. She was looking behind me. She was almost looking through me. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing there. Betty began growling as I felt a freezing cold wind flow through me. For a few moments, my whole body went numb. I felt so lightheaded I fell to my knees. Betty ran over, barking at the unseen, and then nuzzled her head beneath my arm to help me to my feet. "Come on, let's go, girl," I said as we rushed toward my hut in the fading light. Betty stayed at that door, staring right ahead, waiting for any sound from outside. I felt very strange, like I'd been drugged. My eyes were rolling around back and forth in my head until I couldn't keep them open anymore. I fell back on my mat, passing out cold. And I dreamt that I was back in the Wyoming forest at the site of Buddy's death. and I was holding his bloody body in my arms as I sobbed, and I could hear that drunken man catching up with his hunting partner, and that's when I realized something that I kept locked up inside of me for decades. Were they laughing? They absolutely were. And then it happened. My body filled with flames of fury and fiery rage of revenge and vitriol. I kissed my sweet boy on his head, I laid him back on the earth, and then I jumped up and I sprung into action. I was gonna kill them. I was gonna have my retribution. But I woke up back in that hut in paralysis. I couldn't move. I was trying to scream through my mouth, but it was sealed shut. My body felt like a brick of ice, like I was frozen on top of a massive lake below me. And I could hear these whispers from underneath taunting me. Kill him, they said. You kill them all. Betty was barking so loud that Sergeant Woodlock barged in to find me on the ground beside my mat. Medic, he yelled as I began to seizure. And within a few moments, the medic had arrived and turned me on my side until the convulsing in my brain stopped. After a few hours in bed, I stumbled my way out in those trenches where the other men were. Lena was reading from a dusty old book. What is that? I asked as I tried not to fall over. It's a Soviet journal from 1988, he said. It says that they experienced similar things, like Kerrigan and the radio transmissions, like dogs staring and barking at invisible things. And now, like you, seizures. Freezing cold temperatures. He looked worried before admitting, I think they all died. How? Woodlock asked. Lena shook his head. I don't know. The last entry just says, they're coming from below. You shouldn't have that. Z warned, backing away from the journal. Reading their names brings attention. We should leave, I said. We should all leave now. No, you will all man your post. Woodlock then turned to me. Jackson, you get some rest today. You get your head straight, and we'll see how you feel tomorrow. There's no use spreading fear, and being out here like this, it can fill any man's head with nonsense. Get it together. But each night after that, we individually awoke to find the ground around our sleeping mats wet and disturbed. Even though we were all experiencing these supernatural happenings, a kind of delusion had taken over us where we were unable to face this threat consciously or to run away physically. There was no fight or flight, there was only freeze and paralysis. A week later, Private Wilson had what he referred to as a time slip. During this violent dust storm, he glimpsed Soviet soldiers manning the exact positions that we were standing in. He said it was like they were overlaid like a photo filter, like the past and the present were overlapping. And after that storm cleared, we found boot prints pressed into the hard-packed earth, prints that matched Soviet military-issued footwear from the 1980s. And then the prints abruptly stopped at the edge of the camp where they'd just vanished into thin air. Wilson had this full-blown psychotic break. He had to be restrained in his hut for nearly 3 weeks after that. The nightmares, paralysis, the freezing spells, they continued to happen nearly every night, but I stopped acknowledging them after a while. In a sense, I would forget about everything evil that was happening. Once I was back outside of my hut, the only thing that really brought me a sense of peace was Betty, so I just followed her lead. Our last day arrived on OP Rock Day 59 of our 60-day deployment, and all electronic equipment simultaneously failed. Radios, thermal optics, night vision, satellite phones, everything went dead. This matches the final entry exactly, Lena said. The night before that they were found dead, all their equipment failed too. We all held our breath, but we said nothing. It was my turn for the watch position that night along with a few other men, and I was immediately distracted by what looked like this falling star. And that's when I heard that distinctive whistle of an incoming RPG. Get down, I yelled, just as I heard the explosion inside of our camp. And without warning, machine gun fire erupted outside the perimeter. We scrambled to our defensive positions, unable to determine the source. Over the next 3 hours, we endured a relentless assault. And in the darkness between the flashes, I glimpsed Soviet-era soldiers appearing briefly. engaged in their own desperate battle against unseen enemies. The two dimensions merged as two battles separated by decades simultaneously occurred. And then out of nowhere, I saw trees and I saw that forest interface over our scene. I saw Buddy lying there right on the ground. And I saw that drunk hunter standing with his rifle looking almost proud what he'd done. I could hear Buddy whimpering. So I aimed my gun and I unleashed bullet after bullet into him. Dawn began to break as I heard the words that I'll never forget. "Jackson, stop. What are you doing?" As the light filtered in, I saw what I thought was Buddy, covered in blood, but it wasn't. It was Betty. Oh my God, what have I done? I cried out as I ran over to her, but it was too late. She was gone. I went into shock after this. I truly lost my mind. I committed myself to a psychiatric hospital once I was back in the States, where I'm writing this from today, 14 years later. No one believes my story about the curse of the Djinn and how it made me go crazy. It's because people don't understand that a curse doesn't care who you are or where you're from. Its primary concern is only whether or not you step foot on its land. The point of no return. A curse uses traumas of your past to twist and turn them inside of you into madness and towards your own ill-fated end. I didn't steal those stones from Amiraga, but I surely paid for their sins with my sanity and with the death of a brave, sweet, loyal dog. Some of the US Marines stationed at OP Rock in 2009 have corroborated bits of Jackson's story from anonymous Reddit posts and interviews. They say that the day after the invisible attack, there was no destruction from the RPG. There were no bullet holes. There were no explosion marks. There was zero evidence of any kind of attack. And many of the Marines who survived those 2 months in Afghanistan endured strange and mysterious deaths, each circling back to some kind of traumatic event experienced throughout their lives, including their time in service. But the revengeful curse of the Djinn leaves no untouched survivors. It holds on forever. And this is why those who know what happens on OP Rock, they stay as far away from it as they can. What do you think happened on OP Rock? Have you heard or read about these accounts as well? What's your take on it? What do you think about this story that we unearthed here for you today? Leave a comment down below what you thought. I read every single one and reply to them too. And for more scary horror stories, please share with those who want to hear it and subscribe. See you in the next video.